Today we're going to be continuing to read Journey, and we're going to go through chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 4. It is late June, the longest day of the year, Grandma tells me, and the hottest so far. Grandfather and I argue all the way to the car. Actually, Grandfather calls it a dialogue we're having. I call it a fight. We fight because he wants me to drive to town. I don't know how, I tell him loudly, following him to the driveway. You'll learn. I don't want to learn. You'll be glad someday. Why? I'm an old man. If I die in back of the wheel one day, you can drive. My sister, surrounded by books in the back seat in case she gets bored, laughs. I throw her a look that makes her laugh more. I'm only a little boy, I plead. Then drive like a little boy, says Grandfather. The subject is closed, but not before Grandfather tries to take another family picture. In the distance, waves of shimmery heat rise off the fields, but Grandfather doesn't care. He sets his camera on a fence post and places us by his car. He makes Grandma come out of the house to pretend she's going to town, too. Get a hat, Lottie, he calls to her. Grandma puts on her straw hat with the cloth strawberries and grumbles all the way down the path to the car. Look fetching, Lottie, he tells Grandma as he leans down to peer through the camera. I'm not an actress, Marcus, says Grandma sharply. I'm a hot old woman. You're a fetching hot old woman, says Grandfather, making Grandma laugh. Beside me, Kat wipes the sweat off her forehead. Grandfather's car is already hot. The black surface gleams in the sun. Why are we doing this? I ask loudly. The timer is set, calls Grandfather, ignoring me. Ready? 10, 9, 8. Why? I ask Kat, my teeth clenched. Kat elbows me gently, and we watch Grandfather begin to run to the car. Grandma licks her lips. 4, chants Grandfather, standing tall and trying, I know, to look stately. 3, we all say together, our smiles set. Above us is the droning noise of a small airplane. Don't look up, yells Grandfather, but he does, and we can't help looking too. Not one of us hears the soft whirring sound of the shutter clicking. Oh, Marcus, said Grandma. It's just... She stopped. Lottie, said Grandfather, his lips tight. I love you dearly, and we've been married for what seems like 150 years, but you know there is no such thing as just a picture. They look at each other, and Grandma touched his arm. I know, she said. Take another, I said, hoping he would forget teaching me to drive the car. I'm really sorry, I added, and when I said it, I realized that I was sorry. Grandfather waved his hand. Never mind, let's get going. I've got rolls of film to drop off and pictures to pick up. I've got things to get in town. Things? Asked Grandma. What things? Things, said Grandfather, moving toward the card. Photo things. Come on, Journey. Drive. Grandfather gets in the passenger seat and waits as I climb behind the wheel. There are no seat belts because Grandfather's car is so old. It has scratchy seats and huge fenders. It has a running board. I've never seen another car like his car. My sister says they are extinct. Grandma calls it the passenger pigeon. I start the car. I know about the clutch and the brake because I can drive a tractor, but Grandfather's car is different, and we lurch off, Grandfather bracing himself with one hand, hanging onto the roof strap with the other, Kat laughing in the back seat. The moment we get out of sight of the farm, my grandfather takes out his camera and hangs out the window, and suddenly I know that he wants me to drive so he can take pictures as we move. I know that if we are in a car crash, Grandfather will photograph it as it happens. Keep it steady, says Grandfather, and we pass Millie Bender's parents' fruit stand. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a blur of watermelon and peaches, strawberries, and Mrs. Bender sitting under a striped umbrella. We pass a cornfield filled with crows. Hey, yells Grandfather, and the crows rise up in a flapping of wings above us. He leans out backward and aims the camera to the sky. I laugh. Look, I cry, suddenly excited. Cooper rides toward us, recognizing the car. He stares at it, about to raise his arm in a wave. When he sees it's me driving, his jaw drops. Quick, I shout, take the picture. Grandfather leans over me, and he snaps the picture just as Cooper's bicycle begins to wobble. I look in the rearview mirror and watch Cooper watching us. You know, I say after a moment, I bet the picture of us all looking up at the airplane will be fine. Grandfather looks at me. I think you're right, Journey, he says. Two of a kind, says Kat. Chapter 5. Summer rains came, soft at first, with mists that lay like lace over the meadows. When the sky grew darker and the rain steady, Grandma sent us to gather peonies. Grumbling, we carried dripping pink and white armfuls into the house, filling all the pitchers we could find and a wash tub in the kitchen. The smell filled the house, and so did the ants that crawled down from the blooms, crisscrossing the house like sightseers. Grandfather, restless, lurked through the hallways, taking pictures with the new flash attachment bought in town and breaking into sudden dances of ant stomping. Blasts of light popped everywhere until Grandma ran out of patience. "I've spots in front of my eyes, Marcus. I can't read. Go away. Be a farmer." Grandfather was insulted. "I am a farmer who takes pictures," he said haughtily. Then he brightened. "I am a photographer farmer." Grandma, only a little amused, banished him to the barn, where I watched him take cow close-ups until the cows, bothered by the lights, showed him their backsides. "Maybe the chickens," he muttered. I stood behind Grandfather, trying to see what he saw through the camera. Then I walked to the back of the barn where his pictures hung, looking again at the familiar ones of Grandma and Kat and me. There were new ones, too, Grandma smiling from the stove, and one of Kat hoeing in the garden with a fierce look, the hoe poised above the soil as if she might be killing a black snake. And then I saw it, the picture I had taken of Grandfather with Emmett on his knees, Emmett's mouth open, light from the window around them both. The edges were blurred and soft as if it were a painting, or a memory. Trot, trot to Boston. For a moment, I felt like I was Emmett, sitting on someone's knees, someone who sang to me. I stared, goosebumps coming up on my arms. I stepped back to bend down to see the picture better and bumped up against Grandfather standing behind me. "You moved the camera," he said. "That's why the edges are fuzzy." I nodded. "It's not a good picture, I guess." "Journey," said Grandfather, his voice soft. "It's a wonderful picture." "But I moved the camera." "You did. See how it looks like Emmett and I are the only ones there? How we look like we're wrapped in a cocoon away from the rest of the world? See how the edges frame us?" Grandfather's voice rose with excitement, and I smiled even though I didn't want to. "Well," I said, embarrassed and pleased. "Well, it's not perfect." "Perfect!" Grandfather almost spit out the word, his face softened. "What is perfect? Journey, a thing doesn't have to be perfect to be fine. That goes for a picture. That goes for life." He paused. "Things can be good enough." I stared at Grandfather, then at my picture. After a moment, I felt Grandfather move behind me. "Grandfather?" "Yes, Journey?" I turned. Grandfather was standing at the door of the barn, rain pouring off the roof behind him. His old dark green poncho floated from his shoulders like a king's cape. I swallowed hard. "Do you think that Mama left because things weren't good enough? Do you think that I wasn't?" "No," Grandfather spoke loudly, his eyes dark. "No," he said, softer. He made a move toward me, then stopped. Do you know that I tell the truth, even when you don't want to hear it?" I nodded. "Which? Yes, that I tell you the truth, or yes, that you don't want to hear it." I was silent, suddenly remembering that once in this barn he had told me that Mama would not come back. That was not true. I knew that was not true. "Sometimes," I said softly, "sometimes you tell me the truth." Grandfather pursed his lips. "Well, this is an important truth, Journey. It is not." His voice grew louder. "It is not your fault." There was a pause, then slowly his face changed, and I knew somehow that we were thinking the same thing. But of course, Grandfather said it. "You need someone to blame, Journey. Is that it?" I backed up a step. "Well, it's not Mama's fault," I said stubbornly. Grandfather sighed. "No, I can see that you can't blame Liddy. But that's all right. That's all right." We stared at each other for a moment, then I turned to look at the picture of him and Emmett again. "I remember things," I said. "I remember Trot Trot to Boston." I turned to look at him. "I do." Grandfather smiled faintly. "I'm not surprised you remember, but you were very little. You wanted to hear that rhyme over and over and over." His voice trailed off. I picked up Grandfather's camera and looked at him through the viewfinder, standing there with his poncho and the rain hat. I remember, I said, snapping the picture just before Grandfather's smile faded, that I sat on my papa's lap. I remember the button on his shirt, and he sang to me and held my hands, and he wouldn't let me fall. He and Mama kept me safe and took care of me until I put the camera down and stared at it, until you made them go away. The words were unspoken, but when I looked up again, I might just as well have said them out loud by the look of Grandfather's face. Where are the pictures? I asked. What? Asked Grandfather. What pictures? The pictures of Mama and Papa and me, and Cat. When we were babies like Emmett? When was I on Papa's knees? Grandfather looked down at the floor. There weren't many, he said. I don't need many. Grandfather sighed. They're gone, he said. Gone? You mean Mama took them? I asked. Grandfather took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. The truth? My skin prickled. Yes. Did she take them? No, Journey, said Grandfather. Your Mama tore them up.